Hello and welcome to Maki's Closet. On today's tutorial, I'm going to be sharing with you a video on how to draft a waist snatch inbuilt corset. So if it's your first time viewing my channel, please hit on the subscribe button. Let's dive right into today's video. So first, this is my pattern paper and I'm going to mark out my basic measurements, which is the shoulder to bust line that I'm working with 11.5, shoulder to under bust 15.5, shoulder to waistline, which is 20 inches and half. So for the total length, I'll be making use of 24 inches. So I'm going to place my tape and mark that 24 inches. After marking the 24 inches, I'm going to go ahead to rule a straight line at that point. So after I'm done, I'm going to go ahead to label all the lines, and after that we're going to go ahead to mark the shoulder divided by 2. Go ahead to mark ½ inch because I'm attaching sleeve to the dress. Then come down by 1 inch for your shoulder slope or shoulder slant. So I'm just going to make a line across that part, but I'll still adjust it later. So I'm going to mark my neckline, which is 3 inches by 3.5 inches. So after marking that, I'm going to place my French curve and I'm going to go ahead to connect. So after I'm done connecting, the next step I'm going to take right now is to go ahead to reconnect the neckline, just like I said. So after reconnecting the neckline, I'm going to go ahead to outline it so that it's going to be very visible. So after I'm done doing that, I'm going to mark the chest line, which is the bust divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. So for mine is 8 inches, the bust I'm working with. So after that, I'm just going to replace what I have on this point just to draw a straight line, and I'm going to go ahead to draw a straight line, and that point will be my chest line. So now whatever I have on the shoulder, I'm going to measure it and then place it back on my chest line. With that way, I'm going to draw a straight line connecting upwards. Now I'm going to divide what I have on this part into 2 and draw my armhole curve. But before you do that, make sure you mark your bust circumference divided by 4. It will serve as a guide where the armhole curve is going to stop on the chest line. So I'll go ahead and extend the lines. After doing that, I'm just going to go ahead, draw my armhole, and I'm going to connect it down to the chest line and outline it with my marker. Now I'm going to mark my nipple to nipple. The nipple to nipple I'm working with, is 8 divided by 2. I have 4 inches. So I'm going to go ahead to mark 4 inches on the chest line, at the bust line, at the under bust, at the waist, and at my top length. Now I'm going to place my ruler and I'm going to go ahead to connect, drawing a straight line. So after marking it out, I'm going to go ahead to use my ruler to outline to make it more visible, my marker. So next, I'll divide what I have on the shoulder into 2 and I'll make a mark at that point, connect it back to the chest line. So after connecting it, the next step you're going to take is to determine where you want your yoke or your corset to start. So I'm going to be using 1.75. You can go ahead and use 1.5 or 2 inches. I don't want it to be too revealing and I don't want it to be too covered, so I'm just going to use 1.75. After marking out that line, I'm going to be marking my dart intake of 1 inch at the under bust. At the waistline, I'll mark 1 inch. At the top length, I'll also go ahead and make use of a straight dart. Working with a straight dart is easier, so I'll just go ahead to make use of that. Then I'm going to connect with my ruler on both sides. So after drawing out the darts, I'm going to go ahead to outline it. So the next step is to place my French curve, connect from the bust down to the under bust. Go ahead and repeat the same process for the other side. After you're done doing this, I'm going to go down by ½ inch from the chest line, and from that ½ inch or so, I'll come in by ½ inch. Then I'll go ahead to draw a line from the chest line down to the bust point and I will outline it. After I'm done doing that, I'm going to place my French curve and I'm going to connect for my bust, for my cup. So before I do that, I'm going to check my bust gauging. So this is between 1 inch to 1.25 inches. And after I'm done doing that, I'm just going to go ahead to connect from my under bust down to the bust part, and I'm going to go ahead to use my marker to connect it so that it's going to be very visible. And after I'm done doing this, the next step I'm going to take is to mark my dart intake at the upper part, and I'll be marking 1 inch at both sides. Go ahead to connect your darts. After connecting it, I'm going to go ahead to outline my darts with my marker. So after I'm done doing this, the next step we're going to take is to draw out the cup part. So I'll first of all use my pencil to trace out the type of neckline I want before going ahead to use my French curve to correct it. Go ahead to outline it with your marker. So this is the first part of my cup. To mark the second part, I'm going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4. So whatever I have left between the armhole and that mark, I'm going to mark the center. And from that point, I will be going down by 0.25 inches. You can go out by 0.5 inches. So this is just to extend the armhole. So after I'm done doing this, I'm going to connect from this point down to that line at my chest line. Go ahead to use my French curve to connect it very well. But before I do that, I'll make sure what I have at this side of the cup matches the other parts. So I'll go ahead and extend my chest line. Now from that mark I made at the center, I'm going to connect it to the lower part of my under bust. And this is what I have after I'm done outlining. I'll label my cup as A and B. You can go ahead and use a bust dart for this, but for this corset I want it to cover the bust properly. Now insert your body circumference, then mark the dart intake, mark your bust circumference, mark the dart intake, replace it, and add your sewing allowance. At the under bust, mark your under bust circumference. Mark your under bust circumference divided by 4. Measure the dart intake that you took, replace it, and you're going to go ahead to mark your sewing allowance. Please, whatever you have at your bust, take it down to your chest line also. So at the waistline, mark your waist circumference divided by 4 inches. So after marking that, you're going to go ahead to measure the dart intake, replace your dart intake. So I had excess here, so I just had to readjust it and then mark what I have back. Mark your dart intake and mark your sewing allowance. Now at the top length, you're going to mark your hip circumference divided by 4. So I'm going to go ahead to divide the hip I'm working with. The hip I'm working with is 43 inches divided by 4. Measure the 2 inches dart intake, and I'm going to go ahead to also replace it and mark my 2 inches sewing allowance. So now I'm going to connect from the bust down to the under bust. From the under bust, will connect down to the waistline. So go ahead and use your French curve to adjust your waistline. So after I'm done doing that, I'm going to go ahead to use my marker to outline it so that it's going to be very visible. So after I'm done outlining it, the next step we are going to do is to create another dart intake for this pattern, because we are trying to snatch the waistline. But before we go ahead and do that, I'll go up by 2.5 inches from my top length. I'm trying to create like a little curve at that part. So now I'm going to go ahead to measure what I have. From that point to here, I have 21 inches and half, which is still okay, and I'm going to connect it down. So now we're going to snatch our waistline, and to do that I'll create another dart line that we'll be working on. Now to snatch our waist, we are going to do a little calculation. Now the original waistline is 35 inches divided by 4. You have 8.75. Now we want to snatch 3 inches. 35 minus 3, we have 32 inches. 32 divided by 4, you have 8 inches. So I'm going to minus 8.75 minus 8 inches. So after minusing it, you're going to have 0.75 inches. So this is what we're going to snatch at the waistline. So by the time you snatch it on this part of this corset, on one side of the front, on one side of the back, you're going to have 1.5 inches. Repeat the same process for the back, which is 1.5 inches also. So we have a total of 3 inches. So now I'm going to share that 0.75 into 2 on both sides of the waistline. So now I'm going to go ahead to connect it back to the pattern this way, and I'm going to go ahead to connect the dart downwards after I'm done. And with this, we're done drafting the front pattern of this corset. So after that, I'll just go ahead to outline my darts. So now I'm going to go ahead to outline this part just like I said, and after doing that, I'll connect the upper part of the yoke of the corset. So I'll go ahead and label this as yoke, and after that I'm just going to go ahead to cut out my pattern. So if you have any question concerning this particular tutorial, please leave your question at the comment section, and please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit on the subscribe button. So after this, we're going to go to the back pattern. We're going to draft the back pattern, and after cutting out my pattern, this is what my pattern looks like. Moving over to the back pattern, I've gone ahead to mark out all my basic measurements, and I'm not making use of a zip, and the neckline is 3 by 2.5 inches or 3 by 3 inches. So just make use of what you want to use. And I marked my nipple to nipple divided by 2. That's the nipple to nipple I'm working with, which is 8 inches divided by 2. I have 4, so I went ahead to mark it. Go ahead to mark your dart, which is your shoulder to bust plus 1 inch, and I'll mark ½ inch at the lower part. So I'll go ahead to connect my darts. After connecting my darts, the next step I'm going to take is to go ahead to outline it so that it's going to be very visible. So after I'm done outlining my darts, the next step I'm going to take right now is to go ahead and mark 0.25 at the armhole, just like we did at the front pattern. Extend my dart, and I will outline my chest line because that is where my yoke is going to start. So after I'm done doing that, I'll mark 1 inch at the lower part, and I'll place my French curve, and I'll connect my back. So this is how my back is going to be, and I'll label this part as the yoke of my corset. So this is the yoke of the back pattern. So after I'm done drafting this, I'm going to go ahead to mark 0.25 inches from the yoke, so that I'm going to remove any bulginess or anything that will make the yoke of the back to be excess. So after that, I'm just going to reconnect, and this is the yoke of the back. So now the next step is to go ahead to insert your body measurement. So I'm going to mark the bust circumference I'm working with divided by 4. Go ahead and add my sewing allowance because we don't have any darts there, and extend it down to the bust line. Whatever you have on the chest line to the bust line, measure my the underbust circumference, measure the dart intake, replace it, and add the sewing allowance. At the waist, mark the waist circumference divided by 4, and you're going to mark that. After marking that, you're going to go ahead to measure the dart intake, replace it, and you're going to mark your sewing allowance of 2 inches also. At the top length, mark your hip circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake, replace it, and mark your sewing allowance. So the next step is to connect from the chest line down to the underbust, and from the underbust down to the waist and down to the hip point. You can as well go ahead to use a French curve to connect, but if you don't have, that is still okay. So after I'm done doing this, I'm just going to go ahead to outline my pattern so that it's going to be visible. So after I'm done doing this, the next step I'm going to take is to go ahead and go up by 2.5 inches, just like we did at the front pattern. So now this is not compulsory to use 2.5 inches. You can use 1.5, 2 inches or more, or or more, highest is 2.5 inches. So for an inbuilt corset, the back is always lower than the front pattern. The front pattern is actually longer. So even if you make use of a bust dart for this inbuilt corset, you're going to still achieve the same process for the back. So I'll go ahead and connect this. So the next step is to create another dart intake for this particular corset, because we are also going to snatch the waistline. Remember, after we calculated, we had 0.75, so 0.575 times 2 is 1.5, which is for the front, and we're going to repeat the same process for the back also. So at the waistline, I'm going to divide that 0.75 into 2 again. So I'm just going to fold my tape and I will place it and mark it. So after marking it, sorry, at the waistline, I made a mistake and marked it at the lower part. I'm going to go ahead to place my ruler and I'm going to connect, drawing my darts at both sides. So after drawing that, my back pattern is almost ready, and with that we'll be moving on to the next part. So don't forget to go ahead to outline your darts. So after that, go ahead and label your pattern 1, 2, 3. Now we are going to create the loop part of the corset. So I'm going to mark 1.5 inches. So this is not a standard. You can use 2 inches, or you can even create any shape you want at this part. So the person I'm making this dress for doesn't want much space at the back, so I'm using 1.5 inches. So at the waistline, I'll go in by ½ inch to remove any bulginess at the back, and I'll connect it back to the upper part and connect it back to the lower part. So the next step is to go ahead and cut my pattern. So while I was cutting my pattern, my camera stopped videoing, so I didn't get that part, but I'm going to show you what the pattern looks like after cutting out. So after I'm done cutting out, this is what I have, and the next is to cut the lower part of the dress, which I did offline. So I have a video on how to cut a mermaid skirt. I'm going to leave the link at the description box, or you can go down to my channel. So I did this because of time. So with this, we have come to the end of the tutorial. See you in our next video. Thanks.